Welcome, everybody, back to Coaching Unpacked. We are here. It's for episode 11. We let episode 10 pass us by. We should have had cake. We should have had fireworks. Someone should have coached us instead, but we didn't. And so episode 11 comes to you direct from, well, I'm in Worcestershire. Adam, where are you in the world? Remind us.
Whiteleaf.
Yeah, still no idea where that is. Sarah, where are you?
Sounds like something out of Lord of the Rings, doesn't it? Like
Whiteleaf.
It does, yes.
Whiteleaf
Yeah.
is known for little else other than being the headquarters of Anne Summers. That's it. That's all we've got. Yeah, we've just got
You've
that.
mentioned that
and then some
before.
flats,
Yeah.
and there's a Tesco's. That's us.
I'm hoping, Sarah, when you say where you're from, it's a little more identifiable and people know where it is.
I'm from London. I don't know if you've heard of London.
London. There we are. We'll leave it at that. So, listen, last week we got quite a bit of feedback on last week's episode, which was all about kind of giving evidence. And we did a really cool non-example that I particularly loved. But this week, we're going to do a kind of coaching conversation on what happens if you share the evidence and your coachee disagrees, which gives me the ick. I'm like, oh, Lordy, what do we do? So this is basically what we're looking at today. So Sarah, do you want to let everybody know what we've got in store?
Yes. So we said last time we would kind of tackle this because it doesn't always go super smoothly. The key thing to remember is that during the part of the conversation where you're sharing what you saw, your aim is to build the teacher's awareness of what happened and their insight about what it means. And these are like two of what Josh Goodrich at Step Lab calls change catalysts, which are essentially things that make it more likely that the teacher will change their practice. So with that in mind, that point about building their awareness and their insight, it's not about obviously like ramming the evidence down your coachee's throats, because that's not going to build awareness and insight. It's just going to probably irritate them. We have to appreciate that our coachees probably have a different version of events from us about what happened in the lesson. Sometimes they kind of don't know, they weren't able to kind of pay attention to it because they were so overloaded, or it was just a few days ago and they've forgotten. And sometimes they do remember, but they've got a different version of events. And Adam and I, like in our coaching cuts, talk a lot about mental models. And the idea with mental models is that we all have these models of kind of what's happening, but they're at least slightly different from one another. So if we appreciate that our coachee may have a different version to us because of the way that mental models work, then one bit of evidence may kind of not be enough for them to go, oh yeah, like I see why that's an issue. Let's move on and pick an action step or whatever it is. We may need to kind of what we call follow the evidence and show our coachee sort of cause and effect, like what happened as a result of an action they took or didn't take, a decision they made or didn't make. And importantly, the effect of the actions on decisions on student learning, because that's the standard that we're holding ourselves to in a coaching conversation. What's best for student learning? What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, I think the crucial thing is to remember that I think being able to do this well really depends upon like how you observe and how you take notes during the observation that you do. So in fact, much of the success of coaching conversations hinges on how well you actually observe and take notes and prepare for the coaching in the first place. So if we were to set up a bit of a contrast, so let's have coach one, they go into a lesson to observe and they make this note, right? So PowerPoint slide on photosynthesis is cluttered and unreadable. Okay, so that's the note that they make. And like to contrast that, coach two goes into a lesson to observe and they make these notes. So they might say, teacher puts up slide with 5 images on. So it's really precise. 2 flowers, brackets, cartoons. They've obviously been tripped up by the fact that there's like a cartoon element to the fact that there's flowers being shown. 1 a photosynthesis diagram, 1 plant, again, brackets, photo, 1 leaf diagram that's been labelled. Then they might go kind of drop down the line and go, now teacher begins their explanation. 4 students, 2 on one side of the table, 2 at the back. They're frowning at the screen. So again, it's really precise as to what's actually happening in that moment. And then they might go a little bit further and go, note down, teacher asks students to summarize the explanation. And one student asks, which bit do we copy? And another says, do we write about the forest? So, we're capturing exactly what it is that those students have said, exactly when they've said it, exactly after what has just, or before what's happened just before these students have asked those questions. And then we might go even further and go, right, the teacher asked them to label the diagram. After 2 minutes, 14 students haven't started, 7 students have left blanks or put question marks. So again, it's that really hard evidence, but crucially, it's hard evidence that flows one thing after the other, right? So if you were to compare those two sets of notes, you can see they're completely different. One makes a judgment right from the offset. And this is, I think, the biggest single difference between them, and the most important thing, I think, to know and to learn about taking good notes and in observations. So in one of them, you've got a judgment from the outset with no specific evidence, and the coach hasn't kind of followed a trail of breadcrumbs to look at what the effect on learning might be. But the other set of notes, it's way more specific. And that's something that on the Step Lab CCL that I've completed at the end of last year, we learned how to do that really, really precisely. So being super specific with the notes that you make. And that's because capturing notes in that way then enables this really non-judgmental conversation to take place where you can genuinely support insight and awareness. And it enables you to show that you've followed it down right the way down onto the impact on learning. And that's the thing that really matters. So at the end of that like trail of notes that Coach 2 wrote down, we got to what the likely impact on learning was, because we've got evidence on what did students actually do to show us some evidence of what they'd learned or understood. And that's really the key to this, isn't it, Sarah? It's about being really, really precise, but following that trail of evidence until we hit something that we can kind of attribute to student learning.
Yeah, I don't want to kind of anticipate where we're going to go with this with some outstanding acting that I know we're going to be seeing very shortly. But kind of to me, that strikes me as an argument of judgment and opinion being placed to one side because we've got the evidence in front of us that's like leading us in a certain direction. So if your coachee disagrees with you, I imagine there's a much quite a structured way to have that conversation with them. So I'm really keen to see this in action. So if we can we dive into an example of the coaching for today? Sarah, let's have some context.
Yes. So just to kind of set up this conversation that you're about to hear, I'll be the coach today, and I got a bit tripped up. So that means that something sort of tripped up my mental model of how learning happens kind of when I saw that Adam put this photosynthesis slide on the board. So I had this hunch that there was kind of too much information on it. And that's when I really was recording very precisely what I saw as Adam was relaying to you there. And that enabled me to kind of form this hypothesis that students were struggling to really listen and pay attention to Adam's explanation, and were trying to kind of work out what these images were.
Before we, because I can tell you're ramping up, we're heading towards somewhere, you're going to show us something. However, you just said about being tripped up, and I've got to say on behalf of both of you, being tripped up is something that is featured in Matt Stone, Tom Sherrington's and Ollie Caviglioli's new walkthroughs coaching book. You're in there. I mean, Sarah, you've already had one, but Adam, you've made the list. You've ticked off a bucket list. You've got a little doodle by Ollie Caviglioli. Like that's it. I've got to find something in my life now to do to match that. But to be honest with you, the whole book is an absolute game changer for coaches. This is absolutely not an ad. No one's asked us to say anything, but you're both in there, and being tripped up is a really cool way of thinking about noticing what's gone wrong in a room, or maybe not gone wrong, but something that's, it's an excellent way of putting it. It's tripped you up. You're going to hang on a second and forming that hypothesis. I just wanted to put that in there right there because you said tripped up, just really calmly and smoothly, like it's absolutely no bother, but it is. And congratulations to you both, because it's an awesome contribution you've made to that book.
Do
you know? No, I was just going to say, like, I think it's this idea of getting tripped up. That the phrase was Sarah's initially, and I think the reason why I loved it so much as well is because it kind of accepts the fact that as a coach, you do go in to watch someone else teach already with a preconceived idea of what good teaching is. And I think sometimes you can like pretend that, oh, no, I don't at all. I'm not going in there with any kind of idea of what I might like to see or what good teaching is. I'm there purely just to observe. And that's never really the case. You are constantly making judgments about what you see based on what you think you would do in that situation. That's completely normal. And I think the phrase "get tripped up" just basically captures that moment where the teacher does something that you probably, or you would hope that you wouldn't have done, or you would have done differently. And so you've got that kind of clash between, this person's done something slightly differently to me. Doesn't mean that person's wrong or you're right or the other way around, but it just means, there's a difference here in what I would expect, what my mental model says, and what this person does. And that's the thing that kind of stops you in your tracks and is like, I've got to focus on this. And that stopping is getting tripped up because you don't expect it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. It's the moment you know you need to pay more attention. It's not, as Adam says though, quite rightly, like it's not the moment where you're like the teacher's wrong, because that's that coach
yes.
one that you just said, Adam, where they just wrote slide, like that teacher got tripped up and wrote slide is rubbish or whatever it was. The point is now you've got tripped up, you're alert to that situation, like the photosynthesis slide, and it's your job to slow your judgment down, slow your thinking down, and just capture what you see very specifically. So my hunch is that there's too much information on this slide, but I'm nowhere near ready to coach on that because I haven't followed the trail of evidence yet. So as I'm preparing for coaching, so I'm observing, I need to follow that trail, just like Adam showed us with that coach earlier on. So let's dive in then to the coaching conversation. And remember, Adam's not going to accept my evidence, which is quite right. Like he shouldn't just accept my evidence if he doesn't agree with it. So let's see how this plays out. And Chris, as always, is going to be our kind of, you're going to sort of mop up the thoughts of how this sounds and how this feels. Okay, should we start, Adam?
Yes, please.
Okay, Adam, so let's zoom in on your explanation of photosynthesis and the slide with the leaf diagram that had that forest background and the sunlight photos and the different images on it. Could we just take another look at that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, right here on the computer.
And what was your goal when you explained this slide?
So I wanted to show how photosynthesis happens in nature. So not just as a diagram, it's a real thing. And I thought that the real images would make that super engaging for the students.
Yeah, that's really understandable, as otherwise it can feel quite abstract, can't it, photosynthesis? So let's work out whether this happened, so whether your goal kind of was achieved. So when you were explaining the diagram, what were students looking at?
The diagram, 100% the diagram. That's what I was talking about, and it was super big on the screen as well. You can see here, and they didn't appear to be off task at all. And I don't remember needing to stop or do a reset or anything. So yeah, they were on that diagram.
Yes, I didn't notice you needing to do any of that behaviour management either. I noticed a group of students, so 2 on that side table and 2 at the back, who were frowning at the screen. It appeared as if they weren't sure what to focus on.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think probably more likely is that they were just thinking about what it was that I was saying.
Yeah, I actually wasn't sure either because frowning is a difficult thing to interpret. So it was when I saw them frowning that I wondered if the slide might actually be distracting them. And that was kind of my hypothesis in that moment. So I started to note down what was happening so that we could work it out together. And when you asked them to summarise after you'd done your explanation, one student asked, which bit do we copy? And another one said, do we write about the forest, which was one of the images on the slide. And this then led me to kind of maybe think that they hadn't quite been able to listen, and they were perhaps distracted by some of those images. What do you think?
Yeah, they like to do that sometimes, like ask questions to stall the lesson a little bit. But I don't think it's about the slide, honestly.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And you do see them a lot, so you would know that. And it could have been that. But let's follow the evidence on this because I carried on kind of capturing what I was seeing really specifically. What happened when you asked them to label the diagram after?
Yeah, quite a few couldn't do it fully, I guess. I think maybe some of them were students that you saw frowning. It might have been those same kids. But I still think the images help. I've used them before and they've been fine.
Absolutely, and visuals can help. You're totally right. What we're digging into is how many and how those images are kind of working together to support your explanation. So right now there are a few images on the slide, and they're doing kind of slightly different jobs. And that what that can do is overload working memory. And cognitive load theory tells us that if students are trying to figure out what's relevant on the slide, then they're going to struggle to listen properly to your explanation. So images can be really good. It's just maybe us thinking about the way they work together with your explanation.
Okay, so you're saying that even if the images are good individually, together they might be too much? Like, that might have been it?
End of example.
And Chris is on mute. No,
I am on mute, and it's a good job because I was making some weird noises. That really interesting because you are obstinate there, Adam.
that's me.
So this kind of makes sense now because that was really skillfully done, Sarah. Who, I mean, if you're watching the Visualize podcast, Sarah is currently, she's got the mute button on because she is hacking her guts up, coughing away. It's because you were such a good coach, so you were so authoritative. I mean, Adam, you disagreed with Sarah at almost every point there. But kind of what happened was, as if we're going to continue with the breadcrumb metaphor, as the breadcrumbs were laid out, you couldn't really argue with that, I guess, that gentle flow of evidence, all the way from what Sarah had noticed, what tripped her up, all the way through to her additional observations, and then finally to the impact on learning, which as a teacher you then couldn't kind of get away from. You know, it's not done in a judgmental way. In fact, at almost every point that you kind of disagreed, Sarah kind of placated you and said, "Oh yeah, that is, you are right. That is difficult." Or, "Yeah, that can be complicated." Yeah, I was confused too. So there was kind of like Sarah, you were bringing Adam along in that journey of confusion. If we're both confused about this, let's find out what it is together. And so in so doing, you didn't let Adam off the hook at any point, which is important because we need to hold ourselves accountable for having the very best effect on student learning. So in that moment, I guess, Adam, brilliantly acted as well. Listen, it's your little trophy. How's that making you feel when those points are being made?
Yeah, like you've made really good points. It isn't judgmental. It's nice. It's flat evidence. There's no judgment in the way that Sarah delivered the evidence. It was literally just what had happened. And I think that does two things. It shows that the coach has clearly been paying really close attention, and therefore they think that it's an area that it's worth focusing on. But it also shows the amount of care, I think, that the coach has put into it. Like, they haven't just made a snap judgment. They've followed that evidence and followed it and followed it and followed it. Like, it comes across that they are very bothered about getting this right and giving me something that is helpful. I think the other thing to add there as well is that my belief as the teacher in the first instance was that's not really a problem there. At every juncture, Sarah gave me the option to continue believing that. And I did. I continued to believe it until I really didn't have a basis to believe it any further. And I think that's the most skillful thing. And it's the difference between ramming the evidence home and what Sarah did, which was that at every stage, I still felt like, I can continue to believe this if I want to. And Sarah's fine with it if I do want to continue believing it. But eventually it gets to the point where it's like, I can't in good faith continue to believe what I currently believe. So I think that's
actually what really struck out for me, sorry, Adam, is the fact that Sarah's skills as a coach was able to make sure she'd written down when the questions were asked. Oh, do we have to do this, or do we have to write about the forest? That felt for me like a bit of a turning point in the placement of the evidence, because it wasn't Sarah's arrogant assumption, well, the kids aren't learning what you're teaching them because they're overloaded. It was like, they asked these questions. Why do you think they asked these questions? And that put you in a corner. I felt quite comfortably where you were like, oh, well, actually, yeah, I guess they weren't. If they're asking those questions, maybe you did this little like embarrassed laugh, like, oh, I guess they didn't really know what they were doing. So you then undid your own defense, I guess, which makes me sound like it's combative, and it's not. It's just that I'm being a bit flowery in my language. But it's like you weren't able to stick with that storyline, that defense that you're giving of yourself, because you are defending yourself. Someone's coming in here going, how can we make it better? Which often puts people who are not used to coaching at, well, is it bad then if it needs to be better? Because that's how some people feel when they're placed in the coaching situation. Let's get better together. Well, oh, so you're saying I'm not already better? Because not all teachers come to teaching with the idea that getting better is a continuum and it's never going to end. We're never going to have quality first teaching as a finish. We're never going to have a quality first teacher. That is an evolving thing. It's interesting.
I think that some of it as well is it's about, and I think this is a framing thing. It's not about can you convince the person that you've spotted a problem, because if it was that, you could just give it to them straight off. You'd reel off the evidence in one go. They'd be pretty convinced, right? It's not about that. It's about both coach and teacher coming to a genuine shared understanding and agreement on what actually happened. Like, we talk a lot in coaching about securing agreement, and I think often what we think we mean by that is securing agreement about what the teacher's going to work on next. I don't think that's it's certainly not the most interesting type of agreement. The most interesting type of agreement to go to, and probably the more important type of agreement, is, can we agree on what actually happened? And that's really what Sarah's doing here. She's just shedding more and more and more and more light for me on what actually happened in the room. And eventually, when I can see everything that happened in that room from all of the examples that she gives me, eventually that whole picture becomes clear, and I go, okay, now I see actually there's a problem for learning here.
If I may offer that kind of, it's in the walkthroughs coaching book, but it's also something that both Sarah and you have spoken about. It's going from that very specific lens of being the teacher to sitting in that much wider lens of the coach.
That's it.
And kind of say, oh yeah, I can see that now. So you've always spoken about coaches walking into a room, and as coaches, we've got this massive spread. We can see the entire room. We can see things and complexities that the teachers can't see because we're not teaching. And the teacher's lens is very focused. It's very specific and nuanced to a point where they can't see all these bigger things. And actually, in this part, by sharing the evidence so flatly and so gently and so kind of without the coachee being able to backpedal on that, because you've come to that shared agreement, you've helped widen their lens to a more open, kind of transparent view of the room, where they go, I'm sat with you. And surely, as a person who was quite skeptical about coaching when we first started, kind of bringing that equity of position into the room, where you're like, I'm with you. Yeah, this is great. Now we're together. We're kind of on the same page, and you've lost that sense of this person's coming in to judge me, because you've bought the coaches slowed down their helicopter blades, and you've sped yours up, and they're at the same speed, or having the same conversation on the same level, and there's a mutual respect there that's come out of that shared understanding.
Yeah, I think it's on the coach to. You can always say during contracting, when you set up the relationship and throughout, you can say, like, I'm not judging you, I'm not here to judge. But you have to show that you're not here to judge through your actions. Otherwise it's just words. And like what you said there, Chris, it's like we have to establish that we have these different versions, we have these different lenses. Adam talks about, like you said, the wider lens and the more detailed lens. That's such a good way of saying, like, just step into my lens, like, for a minute, I'll show you kind of what I saw, but I know I don't know yours. And we need those versions to kind of come together. But both of you just made so many, I've just been scribbling down what you've been saying. So it's been absolutely brilliant. Adam, like, it is so much more interesting to try to get agreement on, like, the versions of events and what happens and what they meant, because neither of us know for sure. So we want to kind of bring those two things together. And sometimes the coach will change their minds and it will be more the teacher's version of events.
Yeah,
but sometimes you've followed the trail of evidence, haven't you? You really are quite confident that your hypothesis has been borne out in the effect in student learning. And then that goes back to Chris's point earlier on about we hold ourselves accountable to what's best for student learning. So as a coach, you're not there to, like, never push your teacher out of their comfort zone. Like, sometimes you have to keep on with that evidence a bit, drip feed that in, and get to that point where, like you said, Adam, you can't continue to believe it anymore. Like, what a great way of putting it. Like, it's not a wall of evidence that smacked you in the face, but it's this nice drip feed where you're like, oh no, but this. Oh no, but this. Oh yes. you know,
That's right.
and you can't logically keep going in the face of that. So
That's
yeah,
right.
I think that's the right thing to do when a coach really believes they followed that trail of evidence, which loops back to that point at the beginning that Adam made, which is you can't do this unless you prepare properly.
Yeah.
If you prepare badly, you can't do this.
Yeah, you're like absolutely right. I think beautifully summed up. I think there's so much that can be gained from taking this kind of approach, and I think again it comes back to the philosophy of like, what is it you're trying to achieve? Are you going into that conversation to try to get somebody to do the thing that you think they should do, or are you going into that especially that part of the conversation going, I want both of us to get an improved understanding and a shared understanding of what actually happened? Because you're right, Chris, like you have the teacher has this necessarily narrower lens, and it is about the coach going, look, come and sit in my lens for a little while. It's, I've got that wider view, so I'm going to be able to give you some of this detail that you wouldn't have missed in that moment. But then it's also about the teacher going, yeah, and come and sit in mine, where I can give you this rich detail about these students and about what we've learned previously and what we're going to go on to learn next that you don't currently have. And then when those two come together, that's where you get shared understanding. And that's where Sarah and I arrived at the end of that conversation. It wasn't actually an agreement on what we were going to do. It was a shared understanding of what happened. But as Sarah says, you imagine as that conversation goes on, how much easier that's now going to be. It's just going to be inevitable what we need to do about it, because now we clearly understand together and agree on what actually happened.
Yeah. And I know we keep talking about Sarah and Adam, but just for like listeners, like we obviously scripted that for, just sorry to take the magic away from it, but we scripted that for just to show how these conversations can go and how they can go really well. So what we're really saying is coach and coachee. So that's you listening and whoever you're working with this can be done. It takes work and it takes some thought, but it's not Sarah being a great coach and Adam being a great coach. It's like this is something we've learned over time, isn't it, Adam? To do. You just want to like accelerate how other coaches like do it.
It is highly
did it for a long time. Yeah.
No, you like it is. I think that I'm always super keen to stress like this stuff is highly, highly, highly attainable.
Yes.
A lot of it is built on relationship, I think, as well, and like a sense of there is a kind of a sense of trust that has to kind of underpin everything, but like trust in the fact that like maybe it's not trust, maybe it's more like vulnerability, which obviously Chris talks about a lot, right? But like I'm thinking of a session that I did a couple of weeks ago with a teacher, where at one point I'd said to him, okay, so this happened and this happened and this happened, and at this point here, five students looked away. So are you happy with that? Is that okay? And he's like, yeah, actually, I'm all right with that, because the alternate he'd walked towards a particular child when he asked them a question, and 5 kids that he walked past had looked away. But he said, but if I hadn't have walked towards that kid, then he would have been all over the place, and I would have lost him, and then probably lost 10 others. So okay, right. Well, then what happened was you asked this question, then you asked another question to that kid, went to him again, and this time an additional 7 kids looked away. And this was the coaching cut that we put out this week, right? Where he suddenly realizes, oh, hang on, no, I'm not all right with that number. I'm not all right with 12.
Yeah.
Then we circled back and we said, okay, so why were you not happy with 12? Oh, because it's got to be everybody. I've worked really hard to establish a culture of 100% in that classroom. Okay, so were you really happy with 5, or did you feel like you had no choice but to accept 5? Okay, yeah, no, all right. I wasn't happy with 5. Really, I was accepting it. So it's just another, again, highly attainable example of how you can just show people more of the reality than what they necessarily are able to see for themselves.
Yeah. And you do need a strong model, don't you, Adam, of like how learning, like shared and quite good evidence informed model of how learning happens to, get tripped up at useful points and be able to follow the evidence and look at how it impacts student learning. But it definitely is like very attainable. I would say I feel like there's a bi-directional thing going on here around like trust. So like, yes, you do need the relationship, but you build the relationship through this type of coaching, I think.
Yeah.
So you just kind of, when they know that you're just going to be pulling evidence out, you're not placing judgment on it, you're not telling them how things should be and it's your personal preference, there's no what we call secret standards in the room of like, you just have to please me. I'm Sarah and I like to see group work, or I don't like to see group work. You know, we don't have those secret standards. I gather evidence. I follow my hypothesis. If I find evidence that's impacted student learning, I will come in and like, that's my lens. And like that I think helps to build trust, I think, as well.
See, I think it's integrity, right? It's the coaches, the teacher
Yeah.
knows that the coach has got that integrity, and that means they are going to present the evidence to you, but at the same time, they're not going to have the arrogance to think that they can judge all of your teaching based on one bit of observation.
I love that. There's a lot of humanity there, isn't there, in that? Because we've had quite a few people saying they've been looking forward to this episode. Like, how do we have these really difficult conversations? And what's really striking me is that if you approach it like that, it's going to go wrong. This isn't a difficult conversation. If you've been tripped up by something and you reckon that they're going to be quite defensive about it because you've built up this relationship, then surely you're just going to find more of that evidence. You're going to bring that evidence in a bespoke way to your coachee because you know they really love this way of working. And so in that example, coachee Adam really loves his graphics and he thinks they're amazing, they're really big, and you're able to praise those, and yeah, they're great, and that does help. It's fascinating because I just don't think it's a difficult conversation to have. I think if you use that word difficult conversation, that's talking to a parent at the end of the day. That can be a really difficult conversation, or talking about icky leadership things like capability or data or honourable things like that. If you've built the right relationship, what I'm hearing is that this isn't a difficult conversation to have. This is a natural conversation to have. This is going to happen more often, and possibly more often if you've got a better relationship, perhaps, because you're going to potentially be having these challenging conversations.
I think
Yeah.
they're crucial conversations. Yeah, I think, and that's
Yeah.
a Rachel Johnson phrase. Like, I think they're crucial conversations. They've got to happen. They've got to happen because student learning has got to improve. Because if it's not improving, then what are we doing? Right. So it's a crucial conversation. It's got to happen. But you're right, Chris. I think, yeah, as whether it's difficult or not largely depends on the ethos that you bring to it.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point about like, what are you viewing it as? And I think the coach in this scenario is viewing it as problem solving, not as a difficult conversation, because they're saying things like, I wasn't sure about that either, and so I followed the evidence. So it's like Dr. Neil Gilbride calls it showing you're working out, which I really like that phrase, because it's like, if you've prepared well, then you can credibly say, I've brought to you, Adam, a scenario whereby I think student learning was impacted by something that happened. And this is what I want us to work out. What was the cause of it together? And I think that's a real genuine thing. If you can genuinely do that as a coach and bring it to them and hold in your mind that you don't know everything and you might be wrong, but you think, given the weight of the evidence, that you've brought something useful to your coachee, then I think you're sitting in a really credible space to do the problem solving.
Yeah, without doubt, fully agree.
So,
Sarah,
I
was going to say, Sarah, do you want to sum up kind of where we've gone with this? Because I was really looking forward to this, and I feel like I've thrown a couple of tangents in there, but at the same time, I think it's important, it's imperative that that we have these conversations.
Yeah, it was always going to be a bit of a deeper dive today, wasn't it? Because there's so much at play, and if we made it look smooth, it isn't a smooth ride to kind of getting to that point. It is hard. But I think you have to know your role as a coach, and you have to realize that your role is that extra pair of eyes in the room, and that your coach, you will naturally have that different version of events. They're not arguing with you. They're not difficult 9 times out of 10. It's just a really natural thing to not have the same version of events. And your role there is that insight and awareness, those change catalysts that Josh Goodrich talks about. So key takeaways then. Biggest one is underscoring what Adam said. Prepare really carefully for coaching. Remember those 2 coaches. You want to be that second one with a really specific evidence, following that evidence for the impact on student learning. Secondly is that drip feed of evidence, like show you're working out step by step. That's a really credible way of doing it. it's not a police interview where you're firing evidence at somebody trying to get them to confess to something. It is this like slow. I mean, it could accidentally go that way. You know, it could, Adam.
That's brilliant. I love that analogy.
It's well, my husband's a police officer,
Yeah.
so we just got to be careful with that. And the crucial thing, overarching everything we do, is that holding ourselves accountable to student learning. So if you feel like the teacher is perhaps pushing aside or explaining away something that happened, keep with the evidence, keep with your hypothesis if it's been borne out by the evidence, because you're doing the best thing by student learning, and your teacher will thank you in the end because you'll be coaching on something really important.
That's brilliant. And I guess a slight maybe plug at the end, but I'm beginning to see the real benefits of how videoing sessions is going to help with coaching, because whilst that wouldn't remove the need for the kind of the gentle drip of flat evidence, it's just when you said there you're not in a police interview. What were you doing at 3:05? You were looking in the other direction, weren't you? Weren't you? Look at it. You can't deny it. Just sat opposite there with a cigarette going, I know what you were doing at 3 this morning. I saw you. It won't be any of that. But yeah, maybe there's if you're having these conversations, you think that video might be something to add to it. I know, we do. Once again, I'm not an employee, but I know Step Lab do a great program with videoing, and I know even if you are with them, you can use that. And I guess that would be a really cool way to kind of go, should we watch this lesson back together? And I know we've spoken about that, and it's all in your coaching cuts that come out every week on a Sunday, which are always brilliant. But for me, this is our 11th episode now, and I'm feeling myself begin to slot it. I've done some coaching sessions. I'm beginning to feel myself slot into this way of thinking where I'm not. Do you remember when I first went? I accidentally did a coach.
Oh yeah.
Or 10 episodes ago that was. But I just think it's something that
really coached, didn't you, this week?
Yeah, on purpose. Yes, I did. And I just think it's really nice to hear from people. I met another couple of people today who said that they were really liking what we're doing. So thank you both for working so hard on all the coaching insights that you do. And really looking forward to episode 12 once we've all got over this one, because I think this is going to have chatter up and down the corridors of schools around the world. I'm trying to think, Adam, where was that country that was listening to this podcast? We'll say hello to them from live within it.
New Caledonia.
Do you know where New Caledonia.
Yeah.
If you are listening in New Caledonia and you're listening to today, thank you so much. And if you're not watching that, Sarah Cottinghat just waved at you.
Oh,
And,
yes,
the 7 people in Norway as well.
Oh,
yes.
7.
Yeah.
Listen, I don't even know 7 Norwayish people. Norwegians.
Norwegians.
Okay, now they're definitely not going to listen again, Chris Passy. You've just...
It has been... Don't name me like that. My full name, Mom.
Can I do a shout out before the end? Is that all right?
Oh, please do. Yes, I'll just cut it out.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Chris Passy. Big shout out to Caroline Sherwood, who is a wonderful school leader.
She is, yes.
Follow her on Twitter already, but she's brilliant, and she is a school and trust leader, and she sent me her coaching the other day for some thoughts, and she did what we talked, like her coachee didn't have this situation and did agree with the evidence, and she showed it to her on video, and her line before she showed it on video was, I want you to see it from my perspective, and showed her the video, and it was like doing exactly what we talked about with the lenses, and she just did it really like slickly and cleanly, and her teacher looked really engaged. She was like, oh well, yeah, I do want to see it from your perspective. So big shout out to Caroline for doing that, because it was
and her book Codified Leadership is also really, really good. Adam, do you want to give a shout out?
Yeah, sure. My shout out this week is for Helen Howell. I had a conversation this afternoon with in fact this morning with Helen about the coaching that she's doing in her school, and like the very, very careful, thoughtful, context-driven implementation plan that she's got. And yeah, I just think I think people that take real care over how they're doing this stuff really show a lot of humility to how important this is for teachers, that we get coaching right. So yeah, just big hats off to Helen.
I love that. Thank you both so much. On Saturday, Sarah, I found out that Adam doesn't like, know, or watch Strictly, so he won't guess how I'm going to end today's episode. But thank you, everybody, for listening, and keep coaching. See, look at it. He's got no idea. We'll see you next time.
I'll keep coaching.
Bye-bye.